Don't forget to record. Okay.
Yes, I'm recording. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, good morning, everyone. Gemarah Sanhedrin, we're making huge progress. We're on page 6b still, but nevertheless, it's not quantity in my view, it's quality. And so we are making very good progress. Let's just remind ourselves what we were talking about. We are largely, the sort of large subject, if you like, is that of compromise, whether compromise is a good thing or not a good thing, and if compromise is allowed, a judge is making compromise. Obviously, compromise is allowed between litigants. That's going to be a good thing, but we're talking about compromise mediated by judges. We have a number of opinions. We have Rabbi Meir, who's not keen on the whole thing at all, and he says, well, if you're going to do it, then you need 3 judges. We have one opinion, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who says you need 2 judges, and the Rabbanan who says you only need 1 to do a mediation. And then we started last week with this 8 different opinions of something to do with compromise. And we provided a mnemonic, Sarmash Bankesh, that was the mnemonic. I invited you to contact me privately to be told of the very rude mnemonic that I learned when I was a medical student. I'm very, very impressed with your moral standing, all of you, because none of you contacted me and asked me for that. It could, of course, be because you're all forgetting, getting to the age where you're forgetting things and forgot to message me. So I'll take the first one and think that you are on such a moral high standing that you didn't want to know the very rude mnemonic I learned as a medical student. Okay, so we have this mnemonic and we were working our way through these 8 different statements by 8 different rabbis, which had something to do with compromise. Remember, Gemarah is what is known as an associative text, which means that it goes off at tangents all over the place. The modern equivalent, of course, is Wikipedia, because you start off going to look up, let's turn that phone off. You start off going to look up something about Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and you find out that he lived in the Galilee, so you click on the Galilee, and then you'll find out that in the Galilee there are rams or sheep, and so you'll click on that, and then you'll find out that Dolly the sheep was the first cloned mammal, and within 4 clicks you can be from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi into modern science. That's how Wikipedia works, and that's how the Gemarah works as well. It's an associative text. They'll say, oh, by the way, while we're on that subject, let's have a look at this, which is sort of vaguely associated with it. So these 8 statements, these 8 comments by the rabbis are not all necessarily going to be due to the core subject of how many judges are required for compromise, but nevertheless, they will be loosely associated one with the other. So let's share the screen and have a look and see where we got to last time. Okay, can you see the Gemarah on the screen? Yes, jolly good. Okay, so we spoke about Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yossi Haglili, and he was designated in our mnemonic by a letter Samech. Obviously, Rabbi Eliezer, whose name begins with an Aleph, it's obvious, isn't it, that he's going to be designated by a Samech, not. But he's designated by a Samech because he's the son of Rabbi Yossi, who's happens to have a Samech in his name. So he's the Samech in our mnemonic. And he says very harshly, remember, he said it's forbidden Compromise is forbidden. And not only that, anybody who does a compromise is a sinner. And not only that, anybody who blesses and praises a compromising judge, he's a blasphemer. And he brings a pasuk to support his position. He brought a pasuk from Tehillim, chapter 10, verse 3, which I'll show you now. There we go, chapter 3, remember. Let's go for, can you see the screen, Leon? You're muted, Leon.
Yeah.
Start from verse 1 for us.
Right. Why, Hashem, do you stand aloof? Do you conceal yourself in times of distress? In the wicked one's haughtiness, he hunts down the poor who are caught in the schemes they have contrived. Why do you stand aloof when the wicked man glories in his personal desire and the robber praises himself that he has blasphemed Hashem?
Okay, so there's our pasuk. Botsea bereich ni'etz Hashem. Translated as the robber congratulates himself for having blasphemed Hashem. And Rabbi Eliezer brings this pasuk to support his position that anybody who blesses the botsea, which he says is the compromiser, is blaspheming Hashem. He uses that pasuk homiletically to support his position. We went through that last week. And he said, rather, what should he do? Yikov hadin et hahar. This is where we got to last week. The judge the judgment, the din, must pierce, must make a hole in the mountain. From that word Yikov, we had the word nekeva, meaning a hole, and make a hole in the mountain. And we quoted another pasuk, this time from the Torah, from Dvarim, Ki hamishpat lelohim hu. The judgment belongs to Hashem. And if the judgment belongs to Hashem, then, as Nachum will definitely agree with me on this, if it belongs to Hashem, then it cannot be messed about with. Compromise cannot be made because the judgment is of Hashem, and Hashem, by definition, is always 100% right. So this opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Beno Shel Rabbi Yossi clearly is very clear, and this is where we got to last time. So now we're on new stuff. V'chein Moshe, and he says similarly, Moshe Rabbeinu, he was somebody who said Yikov hadin et hahar. He was somebody who would say, no, we don't have, I'll just give you the pure halacha. Whatever the din is, whatever the halacha is, that is what you'll get from me. I am an ish Hashem. I am the one who's spoken face to face with Hashem. There is no compromise when it comes to halacha as far as Moshe is concerned. And here, the Gemara contrasts Moshe with his brother Aharon. This is a very famous statement, which many of you will have heard. Aval, but Aharon ohev shalom v'rodef shalom. Aaron is the one who loves peace and pursues peace. That comment of the Gemara is a very famous one, that Aaron was the one who always tried to bring peace between man and his fellow, and he was the one that tried to sort out machloket, sort out arguments. Does anybody know where else in the Talmud Bavli, or let's say in the corpus of Mishnah and Gemara, where else do we find this description of Aharon as Ohev Shalom V'Rodef Shalom? Those of you who used to go to Mincha on a Shabbat afternoon in the summer in Chutz La'aretz, in a Nusach Ashkenaz shul, might know the answer to this. So there's a clue. Any offers? Yes, David? Unmute yourself and tell us.
Pirkei Avot.
Pirkei Avot is correct. Do you know where in Pirkei Avot?
I think it's some
one of the 6 chapters.
You're right. There are 6 chapters.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay, Marcel, you're trying to tell us?
It's Hamishi, I think.
It is. There you go. I've got it on my screen. I don't know. Can you see the screen? Okay, Pirkei Avot.
1 in 1.
Mishnah, Perek 1, Mishnah 12. Hillel Omer. Hillel says, Hevei mitalmidav shel Aharon. You should be like the students of Aharon. Ohev shalom v'rodef shalom. He loves peace and he pursues peace. Ohev et habriot. He loves society. He loves people. He's a people's person. Umakarvan la Torah. And thereby he brings them to Torah. Now what the Perek, what Hillel is saying here is very consistent with Hillel's philosophy. Because what we know from this Mishnah and from the Midrash and from Rashi and from our Gemarah is that Aharon was the pursuer of peace. What Hillel adds on here in Pirkei Avot is something interesting. He says, Ohevet abriot. He was somebody who loved people. Briot here in this context means society, chevra. He was a guy who was a people's man. And as a result of that, Makarvan la Torah. He brought them close to Torah, from the word korban, to bring close, to draw near. He drew near people by being a nice guy. Now, that's a contrast. That's not to say that Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't a nice guy. But Moshe Rabbeinu was a bit of a scary guy. Moshe Rabbeinu was the guy who had Keren Or. He had horns of light, rays of light coming out from his head. He had to wear a veil when he came out of the Ohel Moed, because his face shone with the radiance of having been in the presence of God. That's a pretty scary thing for people. I remember when I was a kid and I used to go to Manchester Yeshiva after school every day to learn. The Rosh Yeshiva of Manchester Rosh Yeshiva in those days was a man called Rabbi Yehuda Ze'ev Segal, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And he was a tzaddik. He wasn't a great learned man. He didn't write Sfarim. He didn't write Piskei Halacha. But he was a tzaddik. You could see it on his face. Marcel's smiling, and he will recognize it. Avril's pointing to her eyes. You could see it in his eyes. This guy was a tzaddik. He walked around with a siddur. He never even said a shahakonieh bidvaro without looking inside the siddur. He was a man. He was a holy man. You could see it in his face. And I could see it in his face, even at the age of 10 years old. And Kal V'chomer, you can imagine how it must have been being in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu. It was a bit scary. When the Rosh Yeshiva came in, although we felt that we were in the presence of a great man, if we were messing about as kids and giving the teacher a hard time, if the Rosh Yeshiva walked in, there was total silence. There was awe in the true sense of the word awe, A-W-E. as opposed to the American, sorry, Nachum, but the American use of the word awesome, which really doesn't mean anything these days. So imagine that, multiplied by zillions of times, and you imagine being in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was not somebody who could be described as Ohev Habriot, running around being a people's person. He was the man who our Gemarah is talking about here. He was Yikov Hadin et Hahar. He was the one that would be absolutely straight with the Halacha. On the other hand, Aharon was a people's person. He was the one that when there was an argument, and this is a famous Rashi, I think Rashi says this, when there was an argument between two people, between Reuven and Shimon, Aharon would go to Reuven and say, you know what, Shimon really wants to make up the peace with you, but he's a bit shy to make the first move. Why don't you make the first move? And he'd go to Shimon and he'd say, Reuven really wants to make peace with you, but he's shy to make the first move. Why don't you make the first move? And thereby he would bring people together and he would sort out machloket. So why is our Gemarah going off at this tangent? Because they're making a contrast between Rabbi Eliezer Beno Shel Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who is the Moshe Rabbeinu. He's the one that's saying, Yikov Hadin et Hahar. No, din is important. We do not bless a compromiser. On the contrary, compromisers are sinners. We're contrasting that with Aharon, and the Gemarah here brings the same thing that Hillel said, and that is that Aharon was the lover of peace and the pursuer of peace. And look what he then says, Umeisim shalom bein adam lechaveiro, and he would make peace. Look at that word, sim shalom. Where have you seen that before? Sim shalom. Shmona Esra. Yeah, the last bracha of Shmona Esra, sim shalom. This is Aharon. Umeisim shalom ben adam lechaveiro, shene'emah. And this is a pasuk I'm going to show you in a minute from Malachi, from the prophet Malachi. Let's just quote it here. Shene'emar, as it says in Malachi, Torat emet, the Torah of truth, Haita b'fiho, was in his mouth. Va'avla lo nimtza bisfatav. Avla means a bad thing. Avla is something rotten. How does he translate it? Unrighteousness would not be found on his lips. B'shalom, in peace. U'b'mishor, same word as yashar, upright. In peace and uprightness, halach iti, he walked with me. V'rabim heshiv me'avon, and many he turned away from sin. Exactly what Hillel said. This is the pasuk in Malachi. Let's have a look at the pasuk in its context. By the way, I make no apologies for spending time going into Tanakh when the Gemarah gives us a pasuk, because, as I said to you before at the beginning, for many people, this is the only Tanakh that they ever learn, is the psukim that the Gemarah quotes. If you were to ask 99% of yeshiva bochrim who have learned Sanhedrin, what does it say in Malachi about Aharon? They wouldn't have a clue. They'll have learnt it, but they wouldn't have a clue. So it's important that if the Gemarah is going to give us a pasuk, let's have a look at it, let's learn it in its context, and let's get the most out of it. So let me show you Malachi. Oh, thank you. Here's Malachi chapter 2. And it is chapter 2, verse 6. But let's go from verse 1. Leon, I don't know if you've got Malachi chapter 2 or if you want to use the screen, but off you go.
Yes.
Chapter 2.
No, excuse me. Know that I have sent this commandment to you, so that my covenant should be with Levi, says Hashem, Master of Legions. My covenant was with him, life and peace. I gave these to him for the sake of the fear with which he feared me, for he was in awe of my name.
Okay. Carry on.
The teaching of truth was in his mouth, and injustice was not found on his lips. He walked with me in peace and with fairness, and turned many away from iniquity.
Okay, now just go to the top there and read verse 1.
And now this commandment is upon you, O Kohanim.
Okay, so this Malachi here in this chapter is speaking to the Kohanim of his time. And now verse 2, Leon.
If you do not listen and do not take it to heart to render honor to my name, says Hashem, Master of Legions, I will send the curse among you, and I will curse your blessings. Indeed, I have already cursed it, for you do not take to heart. Behold, I am suppressing the seed because of you, and I will scatter filth upon your faces and filth of your festive offerings. Your sin will carry you to this.
So this is Malachi giving rebuke to the Kohanim for saying they're not doing their job properly. And then he goes on to say, you are the successors, you are the descendants of Aharon. You are the descendants of the true Kohanim. You have a massive responsibility. And then he goes on to say the bits that Leon just read before. This is what I commanded with Levi, meaning the tribe of Levi. My covenant was with him. And then it goes on to talk, and this is talking about Aharon, that Torat Emet Haita B'fihu, the pasuk, which our Gemarah then has gone on to quote. So the author of our Gemarah, of course, did not go to 21st century mainstream yeshiva and had, of course, learned Tanakh very thoroughly, and therefore was able to quote this pasuk of Malachi, and this is the context that we have. Let's go back to the Gemarah. So he says here, the law of truth was in his mouth, etc. He didn't need to quote the end of the pasuk, V'rabim heishiv me'avon. He didn't need to quote that. And as you know from the previous 5 pages of Gemarah already, you know that the Gemarah does not always give us the whole pasuk. It sometimes gives us half a pasuk, and we're meant to know the rest. So why, I would ask you, does the Gemarah specifically finish the pasuk off for us and say, V'rabim heishiv me'avon, and he turned many away, or he brought back, heishiv, he returned, he brought back many people from sin. In other words, he brought people back to the Torah. Exactly, by the way, what we learnt in Pirkei Avot. Hillel Omer, be like the pupils of Aharon, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving society, or makarvan la Torah. Hillel is consistent with the Gemarah, or really the Gemarah is consistent with Hillel, since Hillel came before the Gemarah. Here, that's consistent with the philosophy of Hillel. If I were to say to you, what is the most famous story that you can think of? Maybe you only know one story about Hillel. What would that be? Nachum, tell us the famous story of Hillel, please. Unmute yourself.
Well, this is from Ethics of Sinai by Bunam. And the story goes that 2 men made a bet. And they bet that they could come to Hillel. One of them would come to Hillel and make him get upset and angry, in which he would violate the principles of patience and kindness and everything else. So one of them came by his door on Friday afternoon while he was taking a bath. And one of the pastors said, where's Hillel? Where's Hillel? And Hillel wrapped himself in a robe and said, what do you want? They said, I have a question. Hillel, I have a question. Why do the Babylonians have round heads? And this is a significant question, Hillel replied. It's because their midwives are not trained properly. The man departed, and he returned a day later, and he started yelling, where's Hillel? You want me to stop?
No, carry on.
Okay, where's Hillel? Where's Hillel? And the sage came again, and he came in his robe, and he said, this is a very interesting question. And this went on for a number of times until he came back. This time, why are the feet of the Africans so broad? But in the end, he said to Hillel, you know what? Because of you, I lost 400 zuzim. And Hillel said, it was better for you to lose 400 zuzim and even another 400 than Hillel should lose his temper. And so this is an interesting story by Rabbi Bunam. I'm not a rabbi. He's not a rabbi. But
yeah, okay, that's one story of Hillel. I have to admit that wasn't the one I had in mind, but nevertheless, it does demonstrate Hillel's love of other people. Okay, anybody else got a story about Hillel that once I tell you it, you'll remember it? Okay, I'll tell you the story about Hillel. Very famous story about Hillel and Shamai. Okay, a prospective convert came to Shamai and said, I would like to learn to become a Jew. I want to become a Jew, but I'm only going to become a Jew if you can teach me the whole of the Torah while I stand on one leg. And Shammai, who wasn't as patient as Hillel, said, get lost, and kicked him out. He then went to Hillel and he asked the same question. And he said, can you teach me the whole of the Torah while I'm standing on one leg? And Hillel said, yes. He said, that which is hateful to you, do not do to others. All the rest is commentary. Now go and learn. And that was Hillel's philosophy. That which is hateful to others, don't do to yourself. Don't do to others. That which is hateful to you, don't do to others. In other words, if you wouldn't like it done to you, don't do it to others. Which is another way of saying, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, which is Rabbi Akiva's great saying from the Torah itself. This was the philosophy of Hillel. Hillel was a person who had great patience with other people, as demonstrated by Nahum's story there, and the famous story of the Ger. This was Hillel's philosophy. He was somebody who was Ohev et Habriot. Hillel was the Aharon. Shammai was the Moshe. Shammai was the one, and that's why Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, the houses of Hillel and Shammai, the pupils of Hillel and Shammai, rarely agreed on anything. We nearly always go according to the opinion of Beit Hillel. And I was always very, very comforted by that, because what that means is that the opinion, which may not be the strict halacha, the yikov hadin et hahar, that the din would pierce the mountain. Nevertheless, ultimately, the one who is ohevet abriot, the one who is somebody who is cognizant of other people's feelings, the one whose philosophy was, I wouldn't like that done to me, so I'm not going to do it to you. That is the person who, according to whom we go, according to the halacha. And for me, that is a massively important principle. There is a bit of a problem with that, because there is an opinion that says, and I'm not buying this opinion for one moment, but I have to tell it you, because it wouldn't be right if I didn't. And if I didn't, David Marks would tell me off afterwards. And that opinion is that when Mashiach will come, whatever that means, the halacha will revert to being like Beit Shammai, because we'll all know the end of all machloket, and it will be very clear that actually Beit Shammai is the one who is right. But I'm not buying that at all. I believe that Beit Hillel's opinion is the one that we go by in 99% of the cases, because he is the one whose philosophy it is to be Ohev et Habriot. So let's go back to the Gemara. Where are we? Where's the Gemara gone? There it is. Right. So we have here digressed a little bit to speak about Moshe and Aharon and their different philosophies, which are paralleled by Hillel and Shamai. And that's why I think, to answer my own question, the Gemara tells us, V'rabim heshiv me'avon, this approach of being somebody who pursues peace and being a compromiser will bring people back from avon, from sin. And here, the Gemara is I think, implying, if not explicitly, is implying that compromise is a good thing. So that is Rabbi Eliezer Bano Shel Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. That's number one in our 8 rabbis of our mnemonic. Now we're going to move on to another one. Rabbi Eliezer. Now you're going to say to me, we've just done Rabbi Eliezer, haven't we? And you're right, we did. We just did Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yossi. This is a different Rabbi Eliezer. Which Rabbi Eliezer is this? Well, you've got to look at your mnemonic to find that out. So the mnemonic here is, where's our mnemonic gone? Here we go. Samach, Reish, Mem, Shin, Bet, Nun, Kaf, Shin. Now, which of those letters do you think is this Rabbi Eliezer? You haven't a clue, have you? And the answer, the reason you haven't a clue is because it's not very obvious. Because this Rabbi Eliezer is known as Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov in other places. Over here it tells you this in the Steinsaltz notes. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Okay, so he obviously is Kuf for Yaakov. Okay, so we go back to our mnemonic. Here's a Kuf there. You can see where my pointer is. So he's the Kuf. Now, how you are meant to know that without Rabbi Steinsaltz's help from Rabbi Eliezer Omer, I have no idea at all. And Rabbi Steinsaltz, of course, hasn't made it up. The fact is that he had, sadly in the past tense now, an encyclopedic knowledge of Talmud, and therefore knew that this Rabbi Eliezer, when he's referred to just as Rabbi Eliezer, is really the one that we know as Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and that's the Kuf. So it just wanted to point that out to you, that the Gemara expects us to know lots of things that actually we don't know, and it's only when we have great Talmudic scholars to help us, like Rav Steinsaltz, or like the authors of the Art Scroll commentaries, or like our teachers when we were in school that we never took any notice of, that will be able to tell us that this Rabbi Eliezer is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Now, having said that, let's have a look what he says, because he raises a really interesting question, which is nothing to do with compromise at all. And I know that Julia will love that because she likes a good bit of tangential thinking. This is nothing to do with compromise, but it is everything to do with the verse that his namesake, Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, used to support his view about compromise. And this is an example of the associative nature of Gemara. So let's have a look what he says. Hare, a situation happened. Shegazal sa'a shel chitim. Somebody stole a sa'a, that's a measure of wheat, a quantity of wheat. Utechana, and he ground it. Va'afa'a, and baked it. Vehifrish mimena chala. And he took chala, he separated chala. Ketzad mevarech. How is he going to make a bracha? What do we say in this bracha of taking chala? Anybody here bake their own chalot? No? Yes? Stanley? Yeah? Okay, Stanley, when you make the bracha, when you bake your chalot, do you bake enough quantity to say the bracha? You have to have about 4 pounds of dough or something like that. If you have about 4 pounds of dough, then you have to say the bracha. And the bracha is, blessed are you, Hashem, who, King of the world and all that, who has commanded us to separate the dough. Lahafrish et chala mina isa. To separate the chala from the dough. And what do we do with that chala? Well, in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, we would give it to the Kohen. We would give it to the priest. It was one, chala is one of the matnat kohuna, one of the gifts that the Kohanim, the priests, were given. There are 24 of them, 24 matnat kohuna, and this is one of them. So the chala that you would separate from your dough would go to the Kohen, and he would eat it. He would bake it and eat it. So that is a holy thing. Now, what do we do with the chala that we separate? We have to put it on one side because it has kedusha. It has holiness. And we are not allowed to eat it because we are all tamei. We wouldn't be allowed to eat it at all. Only the Kohen can eat it. And today the Kohen can't eat it because he is not tahor. Because we are all tamei, we're all ritually impure, and we don't have the ashes of the para aduma to make us ritually pure. So nobody can eat this challah. So that's why you wrap it up and you put it on one side, or you burn it. You burn it.
It's holy. Although it's holy, you still burn it.
Yes, you have to burn it because you can't just chuck it away. You burn it as a sign of holiness. I know that sounds a bit paradoxical, but we're burning it because we don't want it to be treated in a disrespectful way. So it's burnt completely, and therefore that nobody can treat it in a disrespectful way. In the same way as we allow, one second, Nachum, we allow the truma and the maaser, which we separate, which is in exactly the same category. We put that aside. And we treat it with respect, we wrap it up, we don't just chuck it in the bin, we treat it with respect because it has kedusha. So that's what we're doing when we take challah. Yes, Nachum, you had a question.
Is there something you do under 4 pounds?
Well,
number one.
Okay. That's
and how do
question.
you,
That's
another
a good question.
question.
Let me answer that question in a moment when I'll come back to it, okay?
Okay.
This challah, by the way, of course, that is why we call the bread that we eat on Shabbat challah, because it's to remind us that it has some holiness because we've taken challah. Really, every bread that we eat has challah taken out of it if you bake enough of it. And we'll come to Nachum's question in a minute about what you do if you don't. But we call the bread that we eat on Shabbat has become to known as challah.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a point which shows that I'm not averse to tangentialism. Apparently that's why you see so much bread on the street after Shabbat, because the Sephardim went whatever. the Sephardim won't throw the challah away, and they leave it on the street. They won't put it in the bin.
Right, that's interesting. Didn't know that. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, I will look out for that in the Sephardi areas on Motzei Shabbat. Very interesting. Okay, so let's go
I've seen it hung on the rubbish bins. They hang it in the bag. I've seen it hung in the on the bins. They hang it on the bins, you know.
Right, but the point is, what Julia's saying is that it's wrapped up and it's...
yeah, in a bag. I've seen it in a bag.
Interesting. Okay, I've not seen that. That's really interesting. Let me answer Nachum's question. Ideally, Nachum, ideally, you should bake sufficient bread that you can take challah and say the bracha. Okay? So, if you have a freezer, then make sufficient and put what you don't need for this week in the freezer. So you make it all in one go. Okay? Another way you can do it is to group together with somebody else. In other words, let's say you've got a neighbor who's baking 2 pounds of challah, of bread, and you're baking 2 pounds of bread. It's not exactly 4 pounds, but whatever the exact figure it is, I can't remember it. My wife knows it off by heart, but whatever it is, let's say you're doing and she's doing or he's doing, or 3 neighbors. On a Friday morning when you're baking your bread, get them all together, get them to bring their bread into you, put it all together, cover it over with a towel or something, and that, as it were, groups the whole thing together. You then have gone over the threshold, and you can say a bracha. You can all say it together. Or one person can say it, and the other 2 can say Amen, and thereby you have all fulfilled the bracha, the mitzvah of doing that challah. Now, let's say you haven't got that, and you've only got 2 pounds. So then you have 2 choices. You can either do nothing, you don't need to take challah, or what most people would do is to separate the challah and put it on one side, but not say a bracha. Because you can't say a bracha because you're not commanded. You can't say who has commanded us to take challah when you're not commanded to take challah on that quantity. However, in order that you recognize that there is a whole subject of separating the challah, many people in that scenario will take challah, put it on one side, but not say the bracha. Okay, so those are your options.
Wait, can I ask one other point to that? And you said that you burn it. You know, you can't. It's not very easily. I mean, how do you burn the bread? What do you do?
Okay. So either you stick it in the oven with your bread, and when you take your bread out when it's cooked, leave that bit in. Eventually, it will burn. Have you never burnt the toast? Can't hear you, Nachum. You're muted.
That's a superficial burn. That's not what I'm considering here. I'm talking about. You said I don't want to dwell on this, but you said burn it, and burning bread is quite a procedure. I mean, it's a starch, and it has to really be.
I promise you, Nachum. If you leave it in the oven long enough at a high enough heat, it will burn.
Not with a flame, though.
I'm burning it. I'm burning it. If I'm doing it, I'm burning it in my grill.
Okay, you can put it on the grill, or you can leave it in the oven. Believe you me, my wife has burnt plenty challah in her time. I can tell you that, and not only the bit she's separated as well.
All right. Okay.
And by the way, if you can't burn it, you can wrap it up, which is treating it with respect, and dispose of it. What you can't do is just chuck it away without giving it some thought, without wrapping it up in silver foil or cling film or whatever other biodegradable material you want to use.
And do you still use that bread that you didn't have enough, that you couldn't make a bracha? Can you still call it challah?
You can call it whatever you like, but it's not fulfilling the actual mitzvah of challah, because you're only commanded to do that when you reach a certain quantity. Now, let's go back to our case here, which is a moral dilemma that we have. Here's a fellow who's stolen wheat and made that wheat into bread. And note, the Gemarah tells us he has stolen a sa'ah, which is quite a big quantity. Certainly, it's sufficient to require challah to be taken with a bracha. So he's now got stolen property, stolen wheat, and he grinds it and bakes it and makes it into bread. And now he separates the challah and he says, oh, how can I make a bracha? Or the Gemarah says, how can he make a bracha? How can you say, blessed are you, Hashem, who has commanded us to do this mitzvah on stolen property?
Why did he steal it?
We're not
Was he
told.
hungry? Does he have children? Yeah,
We're not told. Okay, we're not told. We're assuming that he stole it and it's a bad thing to steal. Okay.
Does he sell it? Does he sell it afterwards?
No, he stole it.
I know he stole it, but he made something that's sellable, which is a loaf of bread. Does he sell it after he stole it?
Maybe. We're not told. We're not told. Let's assume the worst. Let's assume the worst. He's not starving hungry. He doesn't need it to stop his kids from dying of hunger. He's just a thief. He stole this wheat and he's made it into bread. And let's assume the worst. He's going to sell it, make profit for himself, and he wants to take challah. This is a moral dilemma. He's done something bad. This is called in Halacha. This is called mitzvah haba'a me'avera, a mitzvah that has come from an avera. So he did the avera of stealing, and now he wants to do the mitzvah of taking challah. It's a bit similar to a following question. And before we answer the question, I'm going to give you another moral dilemma. You run a shul, a yeshiva, a school, a soup kitchen, or something. A fellow comes to you and says, I would like to donate to you £1 million. And you say, oh, that's nice. We could do with £1 million. He says, only when I've donated you that £1 million, I want you to give me back 900,000 of it. So, and you can keep the other 100,000. And you think, well, that 100,000 would come in very handy. Why not just give me the 100,000? What's all this performance? You give me $1 million, I have to give you 900,000 back. Nachum knows exactly what I'm talking about. And the scenario, of course, is that the donor is claiming tax relief on his £1 million charity donation to this registered charity. He gets his 25% back. So he will get tax relief on £1 million. So he will get tax relief of 250,000. It's cost him 100,000. So he is £150,000 ahead. The charity is £100,000 ahead because they've got £100,000 more than they had. So that way, everybody's a winner. The donor's a winner. He's got £150,000 more than he had before at the end of the tax year. The charity's £100,000 better off. We have now created £250,000 out of nothing. Aren't we clever? The only problem is, of course, is that is called fraud, because that £250,000 has to come from the government in tax relief. And this was not a proper donation to the charity. The donation to the charity was £100,000, not £1 million, etc., etc. I don't have to spell it out to you. Now, that is called mitzvah haba ba'avera. Yes, David.
I think the lawyers at the share would also confirm that this is money laundering.
Yes, I'm sure they would. That is money laundering, fraud, call it what you like. It's definitely mitzvah bar ba'avera. Unfortunately, it also happens not infrequently. There was a very high-profile case in a place called Deal, New Jersey, not many years ago, which was a massive Hillel Hashem. When this happened exactly as I have just described it, happened over and over again, and they were caught. And the people who were doing it were very obviously Jewish-looking people with beards and payers and all that kind of thing. And it was a massive Chilul Hashem apart from anything else. So this is our moral dilemma here with our bread on a much smaller scale, but nevertheless, the philosophy is the same. The question is, can you make a bracha when you separate challah from stolen wheat? Now, before I answer the question, or before the Gemara answers the question, I want to point out another couple of subtleties in the Gemara, which the commentators point out to show us just how brilliant the Gemara is, and just how brilliant the people who learn the Gemara and expound the Gemara are. Why does it go to the trouble of telling us that he stole wheat, he ground it, he baked it? Why doesn't he just say he wanted to take challah off his dough which he'd stolen? Why do we go through this whole business of saying he stole the wheat, he ground it, and he baked it? Any suggestions?
That's the process. That's the process of laundering. That's the whole purpose of it, is to explain the steps by which you can go through a normal, legal, proper behavior, and at the same time have an underlying issue, which is corruption.
That was a perfect answer, Nachum. Perfect answer. Let me explain to you why. What you may not have known but stumbled upon, or maybe I'm doing you a disservice, maybe you did know. The halacha, there is a strange halacha which says that a thief who steals something and changes its inherent essence, that change constitutes a change in the object itself, and it's a loophole. He is no longer obliged to give that back. He has to pay for it, but he's no longer obliged to give it back. For example, if somebody was to come into my back garden and go to the shed where my wife keeps all her craft equipment, and was to take all her hard collected sea bits of rubbish that she picks up off the beach, like bits of tiles and all sorts of glass and all the kind of rubbish she spends ages picking up off the beach, and then sorts them out into different colors, etc., and eventually makes them into beautiful mosaics and puts it on our wall. But before it gets to that point, she has them in little jars of things that she's collected. A thief comes into there and steals her jars of stuff, and then goes home and makes it into a mosaic. She cannot go to that person and demand that mosaic back, because he didn't steal a mosaic. He stole little bits of tiles and what have you. He has to pay for those. He can't just do nothing. Let's say they were worth £100. He has to give the full value of it. But the person who owned those things cannot demand the object and said, those are my bits of tiles. I want that mosaic, because by changing the form of what he stole, he acquires that object. That is a halachic process. Now, what you were saying, Nachum, and I don't know if this was what you were referring to, but it sounded like it to me, which is why I thought it was a perfect answer. One of the reasons that the Gemarah goes out of its way to start off with wheat and grind it and bake it is that at the end of that process, those loaves of bread are now changed in essence from the wheat that he stole. So if I was the thief and you were the owner of the wheat and you came into my house, you would not be able to demand those loaves of bread. You could demand that I paid for the wheat, but you could not demand those actual loaves of bread, because that change of essence from wheat into bread is something which causes acquisition, halachic acquisition of that property. And in some ways, that makes sense. There are dissenting opinions, by the way, that say, no, we're going to fine you. For being a thief, we're going to take it off you. Even though you've put loads of effort in and you've ground it and you've baked it and you've done all sorts of things, the guy can demand it. But that's not the halacha. The halacha is that the change of essence is acquisitive.
When an automobile is used for an illegal, let's say a felony, a bad crime, that automobile becomes the property of the government because it was used in the operation of a crime. So I guess secular law doesn't respect that particular aspect of it. But eventually, when they confiscate any of your actual property that was used in the process of committing the felony, you have an opportunity to ask the government to give it back to you. And sometimes you get it back, sometimes you don't.
Okay, that's interesting. Can I ask the lawyers that are present, just before we come to you, Johnny, one sec. Can I ask the lawyers who are present, what would be the legal situation? Let's take our case in the Gemarah. Somebody steals wheat, makes it into bread. He admits that he stole the wheat. Would the owner of the wheat be able to demand the bread, or only the price of the wheat? Julia, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
I'm trying to think, but basically you're looking at two different streams of law, aren't you? Because the theft is a criminal offence. I mean, it is also a civil offence. But what I was actually thinking was about the money laundering and the layering. And it's, do you know why money laundering is called money laundering? It's because of Al Capone, and he put all the money through the laundrettes. And that's why it's called money laundering. But money launderers layer. And I actually thought that to hide the money, and I actually thought that that's what Nachum was saying, is that it was a process of hiding. But that's not answering your question. So I haven't got an answer to your question, but I just...
There's your homework, Julia, for next week, please. In a civil case, could the person who's had his wheat stolen demand that the loaves of bread are given to him because it was made with his wheat? Okay, that's your homework to find that out for next week.
I'll ask a friend. I'll ask a friend.
Okay, you ask a friend. Johnny, what did you want to say, Johnny?
No, it's a different thing altogether. But if someone steals a pair of tefillin, goes to the trouble of having them checked, and then puts them on, can he make a Beracha on them?
It's exactly the same question, Johnny. Exactly the same question. No, you're absolutely right. That is the same question. So let's finish off today's shiur with the answer to, well, at least Rebbe Eliezer's answer to our question. Now, one more thing before we do go to that. So I told you that the Gemarah goes to the trouble of telling us that it was wheat and then it was ground and then it was baked. in order to tell us that he has changed the essence of this, and therefore we might think that he has acquired it, and therefore we might think that he could say the bracha. There's one other point that I wanted to point out here. He could have just said, he stole the wheat, he ground it, he made it into dough, and then he separated the challah. Because Stanley will tell you that when he separates his challah, at what stage in the process do you separate it, Stanley?
I separate it when dough is ready. When I mix up the dough and it's raised, I separate it.
Correct. So Stanley separates it at the correct time, which is at the dough stage. You're not meant to separate it at the baked stage. You can do it b'diavad. If you forget to take challah and you bake your bread and you've got your loaves there, you still have an opportunity to take the challah, but it's not the best way of doing it. The best way of doing it is the way that Stanley does it. You take the challah at the dough stage before you bake it, after it's risen and before you bake it. So here, the Gemara hints to us, and in fact, we learn, this is one of the supports for the opinion that says you can actually take challah after you've baked it, by this Gemara. Because this Gemara could have said, he stole the wheat, he ground it, he made it into dough, and then he separated the challah. But it doesn't. He said he baked it. So he's including in here the halacha. It's a little, if you like, a hidden halacha. You know, do you remember that thing that they had a few years ago where you had to find Wally, right? You had this picture, and you had this little Wally thing that you had to find with a little red hat on. And it was, you know, it was well hidden, and you had to have good eyes to spot this. And it was deliberately snuck in there. Where's Wally? Well, this is where's the halacha here. They've snuck that little halacha in here by using that one word in this little story, which is not the main point of the story. But in there, by using that word that he baked it, it's telling us that that you can take challah after you've baked it. Not with stolen bread. That's not the issue that I'm talking about. So generally speaking, if you haven't stolen the wheat and you forget to take challah at the dough stage and you've baked your bread and it's not Shabbat, you can't do it on Shabbat. That's a whole nother story, whether you can take challah on Shabbat. You remember before Shabbat comes in that you haven't taken challah from your bread. You already baked it. You can't go through the process and still say a bracha. Right, let's just finish off by telling you what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, with a kuf, says. He says, Ketzad Mavarech. How can he possibly say a bracha? It's morally repugnant that you would steal something and bless God because of this act that you're going to do on stolen property. And he says, Ein zeh Mavarech. You do not make a bracha. Because if you do, what you're doing is not blessing. Ella mena'et. You're actually blaspheming God. It's a chutzpah. How can you do such a thing? God will spit in your face. Let's just quickly nip back to Malachi. Here we go. Have a look at what it says here in verse 3. I don't know if Leon is still with us. I don't think he is. Behold, I rebuke the seed because of you. I will scatter dung upon your face, the dung of your festive sacrifices. He calls the festive sacrifices dung, zevel. He calls them, I don't want to say the word. Why? Because as far as Hashem is concerned there, if you don't do what you're meant to do in the correct way, it's worthless. So this bracha that you're going to make, oh, look at me. Aren't I from? I'm saying the bracha on challah, but you stole the wheat. That's not proper behavior. This bracha is not what I want. What you're doing is you're a mena'etz. You are a blasphemer. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov quotes the same pasuk as Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yosef Glili, which is why it's here, of course. He quotes our pasuk from Tehillim, Ubotzea Bereich Nietz Hashem. And he translates it not as we did earlier on, which is over here, verse 3, and the robber congratulates himself for having blasphemed Hashem. No, this rabbi translates it as Ubotzea, somebody who steals, Bereich, and then blesses, Nietz Hashem. He is blaspheming Hashem. So the person who steals and makes a bracha on it is blaspheming Hashem. That's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion, that somebody who steals wheat, makes it into dough or bread, and then makes a bracha on it, is spitting in the face of God. In the same way as the guy that does the tax fraud and thinks he's a big tzaddik because he's given 100 grand to charity, he is also spitting in the face of God.
But what about the man who is a dishonest person? He gives a contribution to a shul, or he gives it to a hospital or some other wonderful place to contribute, and they don't know that he's a crook, that every dollar he makes is from illegal or illicit business practices. And they don't ask him, where did this money come from? The same as I sit at the table with this man who stole the bread. And do I ask him, is this stolen bread? Do I ask anybody?
Okay, so what's your question?
My question is, what's the process here? I mean, you gave us a complete...
So we have two sides. We have the dishonest man, who is the donor, and we have the honest recipients. Okay? So the dishonest donor is spitting in the face of God, and the honest recipients have done nothing wrong, because they don't know. I wouldn't expect you to come to my house, sit down at my table, and ask me if I've stolen the wheat or I've stolen the money that I used to buy this bread that I'm giving to you as my guest. I wouldn't expect you to do that, and you wouldn't be expected to do that. Unless you have any reason to believe that that is the case, you accept that it's
the reason to believe.
Okay, if you have reason to believe, then I think then you have a responsibility. If okay, let's put it this way, right? A guy comes into your yeshiva and he's got a big white hat and striped trousers and a big tie and sunglasses, and he's got two guns by his side, and he's got heavies with him, and he comes in with a suitcase full of dollar bills, and he says, I've come to donate to your yeshiva, then it would be reasonable for you to assume that this guy's a gangster. You know, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, right? So if you have reason to believe that this money is ill-gotten, then you have a responsibility to make investigation and to do due diligence. And the lawyers will tell you that the recipient of things have a certain responsibility to do due diligence to make sure that the proceeds of what's going on is not illegal. Now, I heard from a rabbi something which I found distressing. And that was this. They asked me the question, what should you, no, somebody asked them the question, what should you do if somebody gives you money as a donation to your yeshiva, which you think might be ill-gotten? Now, the correct answer is you should give it back and don't accept it if you think it's ill-gotten because of what we've said. His answer was, you should buy toilet paper with it because you need toilet paper, the yeshiva needs toilet paper, and you know, that it was a flippant answer. I hope it was an answer in jest. I didn't actually go into it in detail for whatever reason. But the real answer is that you don't have anything to do with it. But if you have no suspicions, I don't think you have an obligation to assume that every donor is a crook. You have to do due diligence, and that's it. Yes, Avril.
On the other hand, the other way, as you know, in Manchester, you get a lot of people knocking on your doors, and you try and give to everybody. So if somebody comes to your door, you're taking them at face value that you're giving money to an honest person.
Yeah,
the same
you're
applies.
right. That's the other side of the coin. And let's take the two scenarios that we had there. We've now got an honest donor and a crooked recipient, perhaps, right? So if the honest donor gives his money honestly, then he's done the mitzvah. The crooked recipient, who takes that money under false pretenses, who pretends to be something that he's not, he's the one that's done the Avera. Do you have an obligation to do your due diligence? I would say that you do have an obligation before you give your money to somebody to make sure that what you're giving them, is going where you think it's going. And if you find out that that's not the case, then I think you have an obligation to let others know that such a person is taking money from other people under false pretenses. So
they have a certificate now in Manchester.
They do have a certificate in many places. They now have a certificate. Unfortunately, in many places, the certificates were worthless because you can buy them on the street corner. And the idea of a certificate is the people giving the certificate are meant to have done the due diligence on your behalf. So the idea is that somebody coming to a town will go to the Gabait Staka of the town, or the Bet Din, or the Dayan, or the rabbi, or what have you, present his credentials. The rabbi is then meant to make inquiries and say, okay, give me a reference. And he'd give him a reference. He would speak to that reference. He would satisfy himself that this guy is genuine, and then give a certificate so that when he comes to my door and he presents me with this rabbi's certificate, I know that that rabbi has done his inquiries and that this man is, to the best of our knowledge, genuine. But that piece of paper is only as good as the inquiries that the giver of the certificate, it's in the same way as a Tu'udat Kashrut is only as good as the person who's giving the certificate. I don't want to labour the point, but there are situations which I've come across over the years where I was aware that there was a supervisor for a Bet Din Kashrut who was not dishonest in any way at all, but he was ignorant. He did not know diddly squat about kashrut, and he was working on behalf of a certain Bet Din as a supervisor. Now, I used to think that people who wouldn't eat at events that were supervised by a certain Bet Din or other were wrong, and if it's good enough for one, it's good enough for the other. But having seen it with my own eyes, that the supervisor was a young lad in his early 20s who knew nothing about kashrut, or next to nothing about kashrut, and he was given the responsibility of supervising this simcha. I had every sympathy after that with somebody who would come and say, well, actually, I'm not sure I can trust this, because the giver of the certificate has not done his job. And it's the same with the certificate for tzedakah. If those certificates of tzedakah are just, worthless pieces of paper that are passed about between one and another, then that's not due diligence. We have been associative here and gone off at lots of tangents today, which is great. So we've gone over time as usual, which is usually a good sign. Not many people have left. So I think we'll call it a day unless anybody's got anything further to say. Yes, Aharon.
Can I ask just one more question on the same point? So if you've got somebody who is dishonest but knows everything about kashrut, you also can't trust them.
That's true, but you've got to know that they're dishonest. It's easier to know that somebody doesn't know anything than it is to know that they're dishonest and does know. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, how did I know that this person didn't know anything about kashrut? I'll tell you very quickly. I'll tell you the story. this person was a friend of one of my kids, well, friend of our family, let's say, and his parents weren't around. He was invited to us for Shabbat. And so he came and he says, I'm going to be late because I'm working. I've got a job as a mashgiach at a kiddush, which is going on in one of the shuls. So he says, don't wait, start without me. Right, no problem. So he comes along halfway through the meal, and we said, oh, didn't know you were working for the Bet Din as a mashgiach. Yeah, I'm working as a mashgiach. I do it part-time. It helps, earn a few bob kind of thing. And my wife innocently asked a question about checking vegetables. It was not to catch him out or anything. It was just a question that she wanted to know what was the Bet Din's approach to checking a certain vegetable that was served in these things. It was an innocent question. And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. He had no idea that he had the responsibility as the mashgiach to make sure that the vegetables were checked and didn't have, bugs on them and what have you. Right? And that sort of opened the door. And then, it was clear from the conversation that he'd had no training. He was just merely given a bunch of cards which said this event is supervised by such and such a Bet Din. He was to go.
And it's Mahadrin.
Was it Mahadrin? I don't know if it was Mahadrin or not. But either way, he was given no training, and that was the scenario. So in that situation, it wasn't the kid's fault. It wasn't the kid's fault at all. Don't blame the kid one bit. He didn't go out there to do something wrong. It was entirely the Bet Din's fault for employing somebody who didn't know what he was doing and didn't train them properly to do it. So that person who I would have been one of those who would have been critical of people going and turning up to a simcha and not eating, or at least ostentatiously not eating.
But the caterer would generally know, and the caterer would be wary of losing their license. So you do.
Not all the caterers care, though, Julia. Not all the caterers care.
On the criminal,
in fact, some of the caterers would be happy to have a mashgiach who doesn't know what he's doing.
Okay. On the civil offence, although the same conduct might also qualify as criminal offence, conversion, which I've forgotten the word, is a claim brought in the civil courts to obtain delivery of the goods and/or compensation for the goods in damages. I.e., it must be the same, because if you've already changed the nature of the goods, then what you'll get is compensation.
Right. Okay. So there we are. Thank you for that. You did your homework very quickly, and it seems that English law, at least, is consistent with the halacha on that point. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to stop recording now. Feel